Queridos hermanos y hermanas,
Dear brothers and sisters,
queridos hermanos y hermanas, junto a ustedes me brota
here with
el
you,
canto de San
I
Francisco.
feel welling up within me
Alabado seas,
the song of Saint Francis.
sí, alabado seas
Praise be to
por
you,
la
my Lord.
oportunidad que nos regalas con este
Yes,
encuentro.
praise be to you for the opportunity you
Monseñor
have
David
given
Martínez
us
David.
in this encounter.
Señor Héctor, señora Jessica,
Thank you,
señora
Bishop
María Lucía,
David Martínez
por
de
sus
Aguirre
palabras de
Guinea,
bienvenida
Héctor,
y sus
Jessica
testimonios.
y María Luisa,
En
for your
ustedes
words of
quiero
welcome
agradecer y
and
saludar
for your
a
witness
todos los
talks.
habitantes de
In you,
Amazonia.
I would like to thank and
Veo
greet all
que han
the
venido
inhabitants
de los
of
diferentes
Amazonia.
pueblos originarios de la Amazonia.
I see that you come from the different native people of Amazonia.
Gines,
Haragbut,
Chipibos,
Esejas,
Mazacanicas,
Maxigencas,
Yanishas,
Yines,
Caquintes,
Chipibos,
Nahuas,
Asachinskas,
Yaminahuas,
Yaneshas,
Cunicuy,
Caquintes,
Mayujá,
Nahuas,
Anchineris,
Yaminahuas,
Cucamas,
Yunicuin,
Candos,
Madillá,
Quichuas,
Manchineris,
Huitotos,
Cucamas,
Chaves,
Candosi,
Azuar,
Quichuas,
Boras,
Huitotos,
Aguajún,
Chawis,
Huampí,
Anchuar,
entre otros.
Boras,
También veo
Aguayún,
que nos
Wampis,
acompañan
and others.
También veo que nos acompañan pueblos procedentes
I also
del
see
Ande
that
que
among
se han
us
venido
are
a la
peoples
selva
from the
y
Andes
se han hecho
who came
amazónicos.
to the forest,
He deseado mucho este
and
encuentro.
became
Quise empezar
Amazonians.
por aquí la visita a Perú.
I have really looked forward to this meeting
Gracias
during my visit to Peru.
por vuestra presencia y por ayudarnos a ver más de cerca.
Thank you for being here and for
En vuestros
helping me
rostros,
to see
el
closer up
reflejo de esta tierra.
in your faces
Un
the
rostro
reflection
plural
of
de una
this
variedad
land.
infinita y de una enorme riqueza biológica, cultural
It
y
is a
espiritual.
diverse face,
Quienes
one
no
of
habitamos
infinite
estas
variety
tierras,
and enormous
necesitamos
biological,
de vuestra
cultural,
sabiduría
and
y
spiritual richness.
conocimiento para
Those of
poder
us who do not
adentrarnos
live in these
sin
lands
destruir
need your
el
wisdom
tesoro
and
que
knowledge
encierra
to enable us
esta región.
to enter
Y
into,
se hacen eco las
without
palabras del
destroying,
Señor a
the
Moisés:
treasures that this
quítate
region
las
holds,
sandalias, porque el suelo que estás pisando
and
es
to
una
hear an
tierra
echo of
santa.
the words that the Lord spoke to Moses. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground.
Una vez más decir,
Allow me to say once
alabado
again,
sea, Señor,
praise to you,
por esta
Lord,
obra maravillosa
for your
de tus
marvelous
pueblos
handiwork
amazónicos
in your
y por toda la
Amazonian peoples
biodiversidad
and for
que
all
estas
the
tierras
biodiversity
envuelven.
that these lands
Este canto
embrace.
de alabanza
This song
se
of praise
entrecorta
is cut short
cuando
when we
escuchamos
learn
y
about
vemos
and see
las
the
hondas
deep
heridas
wounds that
que
Amazonia
llevan
and its
consigo
people
la
bear.
Amazonia y sus pueblos. Y he querido venir a visitarlos y
I wanted to come
escucharlos
to visit you
para estar
and
juntos
listen
en el
to you
corazón de la
so that
Iglesia,
we can stand
unirnos
together
a sus
in the
desafíos
heart
y
of
con
the church
ustedes reafirmar
and share your
una opción
challenges
sincera
and
por
reaffirm
la
with you
defensa de la
a
vida,
wholehearted
defensa
option
de la
for the
tierra
defense
y
of life,
defensa de las
the
culturas.
defense of the earth, and the defense of cultures.
Probablemente los pueblos
The native
amazónicos
Amazonian peoples have probably never been
nunca
so
hayan
threatened
estado tan
on their own
amenazados
lands
en sus
as they are at the
territorios
present.
como lo están ahora. La Amazonia es tierra disputada
Amazonia is
desde
being
varios
disputed
frentes.
on various
Por una
fronts.
parte, el neoextractivismo y la fuente
On the one
presión
hand, there is
por grandes
neo-extractivism
intereses económicos
and the
que
pressure being
apuntan
exerted by
su
great business
avidez
interests
sobre
that
petróleo,
want to
gas,
lay hands
madera,
on its
oro,
petroleum,
monocultivos
gas,
agroindustriales.
lumber, gold,
Por
and
otra
forms
parte,
of agro-industrial
la
monocultivation.
también viene por la
On the other
perversión
hand,
de
its
ciertas
land are being threatened by the distortion of certain policies aimed at the conservation of nature without taking into account the men and women, specifically you, my Amazonian brothers and sisters who inhabit it. We know of movements that, under the guise of preserving the forest, hoard great expanses of woodland and negotiate with them, leading to situations of oppression for the native people. As a result, they lose access to the land and its natural resources. These problems strangle her people and provoke the migration of the young due to the lack of local alternative. We have to break with the historical paradigm that views Amazonia as an inexhaustible source of supplies for other countries without concern for its inhabitants. I consider it essential to begin creating institutional expressions of respect, recognition, and dialogue with the native peoples, acknowledging and recovering their native cultures, languages, traditions, rights, and spirituality. An, an intercultural dialogue in which you yourself will be the principal dialogue partners, especially when the large projects affecting your land are proposed. Recognition and dialogue will be the best way to transform relationships whose history is marked by exclusion and discrimination.
At the same time, it is right to acknowledge the existence of promising initiatives coming from your own communities and organizations which advocate that the native peoples and communities themselves be the guardians of the woodlands. The resources that conservation practices generate would then revert to benefit your families, improve your living conditions, and promote health and education in your communities. This form of doing good is in harmony with the practices of good living found in the wisdom of our peoples. Allow me to state that if for some you are viewed as an obstacle or a hindrance, the fact is your lives cry out against a style of life that is oblivious to its own real cost. You are a living memory of the mission that God has entrusted to us all, the protection of our common home. The defense of the earth has no other purpose than the defense of life. We know of the suffering caused for some of you by emissions of hydrocarbons, which gravely threaten the lives of your families and contaminate your natural environment. Along the same lines, there exists another devastating assault on life linked to this environmental contamination favored by illegal mining. I am speaking of human trafficking, slave labor, and sexual abuse. Violence against adolescents and against women cries out to heaven. I have always been distressed at the lot of those who are victims of various kinds of human trafficking. How I wish that all of us would hear God's cry, "Where is your brother?" Where is your brother or sister who is enslaved? Let us not look the other way. There is greater complicity than we think. This issue involves everyone. How can we fail to remember Saint Torribius, who stated with dismay in the Third Council of Lima that not only in times past were great wrongs and acts of coercion done to these poor people, but in our own time many seek to do the same. Sadly, 5 centuries later, these words remain timely. The prophetic words of those men of faith, as Hector and Jessica reminded us, are the cry of this people, which is often silenced or not allowed to speak. That prophecy must remain alive in our church, which will never stop pleading for the outcast and those who suffer.
Que muchas veces está silenciada o se les quita la palabra. Esa profecía debe permanecer en nuestra iglesia, que nunca dejará de clamar por los descartados y por los que sufren.
This concern gives rise to our basic option for the life of the most defenseless. I am thinking of the peoples referred to as indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation. We know that they are the most vulnerable of the vulnerable. Their primitive lifestyle made them isolated even from their own ethnic groups. They went into seclusion in the most inaccessible reaches of the forest in order to live in freedom. Continue to defend these most vulnerable of our brothers and sisters. Their presence reminds us that we cannot use goods meant for all as consumerist greed dictates. Limits have to be set that can help preserve us from all plans for a massive destruction of the habitat that makes us who we are. The recognition of these people who can never be considered a minority, but rather authentic dialogue partners, as of all the native peoples, reminds us that we are not the absolute owners of creation. We need urgently to appreciate the essential contribution that they bring to society as a whole, and not reduce their cultures to an idealized image of a natural state, much less a kind of museum of a bygone way of life.
Su cosmovisión, su sabiduría tienen mucho que enseñarnos a quienes no pertenecemos a su cultura.
Their cosmic vision and their wisdom have much to teach those of us who are not part of their culture. All our efforts to improve the lives of the Amazonian peoples will prove too little. The culture of our peoples is a sign of life. Amazonia is not only a reserve of biodiversity, but also a cultural reserve that must be preserved in the face of the new forms of colonialism.
No generamos acciones encaminadas a la prevención, sobre todo de adolescentes y jóvenes, ni tratamos a los enfermos condenándolos a la exclusión más cruel.
The family is and always has been the social institution that has most contributed to keeping our cultures alive. In moments of past crisis, in the face of various forms of imperialism, the families of the original peoples have been the best defense of life. Special care is demanded of us lest we allow ourselves to be ensnared by ideological forms of colonialism, disguised as progress that slowly but surely dissipate cultural identities and establish a uniform, single, and weak way of thinking. Listen to the elderly. They possess a wisdom that puts them in contact with the transcendent and makes them see what is essential in life.
La cultura de nuestros pueblos es un signo de vida. La Amazonia, además de ser una reserva,
the culture of our peoples is a sign of life. Amazonia is not only a reserve of biodiversity, but also a cultural reserve that must be preserved in the face of new forms of colonialism. The family is and always has been the social institution that has most contributed to keeping our cultures alive. In past moments of crisis in the face of various forms of imperialism, the families of the original peoples have been the best defense of life. Special care is demanded of us, lest we allow ourselves to be ensnared by ideological forms of colonialism, disguised as progress that slowly but surely dissipate cultural identities and establish a uniform, single, and weak way of thinking. Listen to the elderly. They possess a wisdom that puts them in contact with the transcendent and makes them see what is essential in life. Let us not forget the disappearance of a culture that can just as serious or even more serious than the disappearance of a species of plant or animal. The one way for cultures not to disappear is for them to keep alive and in constant movement. How important is what Jessica and Hector told us? We want our children to study, but we don't want the school to erase our traditions, our languages. We don't want to forget our ancestral wisdom. Education helps us to build bridges and to create a culture of encounter. Schooling and education for the native peoples must be a priority and commitment of the state. An integrated and enculturated commitment that recognizes, respects, and integrates their ancestral wisdom as a treasure belonging to the whole nation, as Maria Luzmila made clear to us. I ask my brother bishops to continue as they are doing even in the remotest places in the forest, to encourage intercultural and bilingual education in the schools, in institutions of teacher training, and in the universities. I express my appreciation of the initiatives that the Amazonian Church in Peru helps carry out in favor of the native peoples. These include schools, student residences, centers of research and development, like the Jose Pio Aza Cultural Center, CAP,
el CETA
and CETA, and new and important intercultural projects like
como el
Nopoki,
Nopoki,
aimed expressly at training young people from the different ethnic groups of our Amazonia.
dirigidos expresamente a la formación de los jóvenes de las diversas etnias de nuestra Amazonia. Felicito también
I likewise support
a todos
all
aquellos
those
jóvenes
young
de
men
los
and
pueblos
women of the native
originarios
peoples
que se
who are
esfuerzan
trying
por
to
hacer,
create from their own
desde el propio
standpoint
punto
a
de
new
vista,
anthropology
una nueva
and working
antropología,
to
y
reinterpret the
trabajan
history
por
of their
releer la
peoples from
historia
their
de
own
su
perspective.
pueblo desde su perspectiva. También
I also
felicito
encourage
a
those who,
aquellos que
through
por medio
art,
de la
literature,
pintura,
craftsmanship,
la
and music,
literatura, la artesanía,
show the
la
world your
música,
worldview
muestran
and
al
your
mundo
cultural
su
richness.
cosmovisión y su riqueza cultural.
Much has been written and spoken about you.
Sobre ustedes.
It
Está
is
bien
good that you
que
are
ahora
now the
sean
ones to
ustedes
define
mismos
yourselves and show us your
quienes
identity.
se
We need to
autodefinan
listen to you.
y nos muestren su identidad. Necesitamos escucharlos. Queridos hermanos
How many
de la
missionaries,
Amazonia,
men and women, have devoted themselves
cuántos
to your
misioneros
peoples
y
and defended
misioneras
your cultures.
se han comprometido con sus pueblos.
They did
y han
so
defendido
inspired
su
by the
cultura.
gospel.
Lo han hecho inspirados en el Evangelio.
Christ
también
himself
se
took
encarnó
flesh in
en
a
una
culture,
cultura, la
the
hebrea,
Jewish
y
culture,
a partir de ella
and from it
se
he
nos
gave
regaló
us
como
himself as a
novedad
source
a
of
todos los
newness
pueblos,
for all
de
peoples
manera que cada
in
uno,
such a way that
desde su
each,
propia
in its
identidad,
own deepest
se
identity,
sienta autoafirmado
feels
en
itself
él.
affirmed to him.
No sucumban
Do not
a
yield
los
to those
intentos
attempts
que
to
hay
uproot the
por
Catholic faith from your
desarraigar la
peoples.
fe católica de sus pueblos. Cada
Each culture
cultura
and each
y
worldview
cada
that receives the
cosmovisión
gospel
que recibe el
enriches the
Evangelio
church by showing
enriquece
a
a la
new
Iglesia
aspect of
con la
Christ's
visión
face.
de una nueva faceta del rostro de Cristo. La
The
Iglesia
church is not alien
no
to
es
your
ajena a
problems and
vuestra
your lives.
problemática
She
y a
does not
vuestras
want to be
vidas.
aloof
No
from your way
quiere
of
ser
life and
extraña a vuestra
organization.
forma de vida y organización.
We need the
Necesitamos
native peoples to
que los
shape the culture of the
pueblos
local churches in
originarios
Amazonia.
moldeen culturalmente las iglesias locales amazónicas. Y al respecto,
Help your bishops
me dio
and
mucha
the men and
alegría
women missionaries to
escuchar
be one with
que uno
you.
de los trozos
And in this
de
way,
Laudato
by an
Si
inclusive
fuera
dialogue,
leído
to shape a
por los
church
diáconos
with an Amazonian
permanentes
face,
de vuestra cultura.
a church with a native face.
Ayuden
In
a
this
sus
spirit, I
obispos,
have convoked a synod for Amazonia
ayuden a
in
sus misioneros y
2019.
misioneras para que se hagan uno con ustedes y de esa manera, dialogando entre todos, puedan plasmar una iglesia con rostro amazónico y una iglesia con rostro indígena. Con este espíritu convoqué el sínodo para la Amazonia en el año 19, cuya primera reunión como consejo presinodal será aquí, hoy, esta tarde.
The first meeting for the Synod of the Amazonian Synod is going to be here this afternoon.
Confío en
I
la
trust you
capacidad
in your people's
de
capacity for
resiliencia de los
resilience
pueblos y su
and your
capacidad
ability
de
to
reacción
respond to these
ante los
difficult
difíciles
times in which you
momentos que les
live.
toca vivir. Así
You
lo
have
han
shown
demostrado
this
en
at
los
different
diferentes
critical moments in your
desembates de la
history,
historia,
with
con
your
sus aportes,
contributions and with
con
your
su visión
differentiated
diferenciada
vision
de
of
las
human
relaciones
relations,
humanas, con el
with
medio
the natural
ambiente
environment,
y con la
and your way of
vivencia
living
de
the
la
faith.
fe. Rezo
I pray
por
for you
ustedes
for
y
this
por su
land
tierra
blessed by
bendecida
God,
por Dios.
and I ask you,
Y les
please,
pido, por favor,
not to forget to pray for me.
que no se olviden de rezar por mí. Muchas gracias.
Many thanks.
Tengo una cama.
Until we